This is the part where I check if the mic works and you folks can hear me. Awesome, great. So, first of all, welcome all of you. I'm breaking in the breakout stage and it feels amazing. If you have questions about the feat, I've been given 10 minutes to do a talk, which is actually 30 minutes long, so these are my pause for thought, so just get used to that. So let's start about hatching the owl, so Twilio's apprenticeship program. My name is Vivek Nair. I've been at Twilio for about 2 years, and I just started developing this program at Twilio about 7, 8 months ago. So before we get really into the deep details about what we did and everything, let's talk about what apprenticeship model looks like in general. First of all, you got something that's about 6 to 12 months, depending on who's doing it, what company decides to invest how long in each of these apprentices. We're focusing a lot on experiential diversity. So we're looking at folks who've had a non-conventional life experience or educational experience. Maybe they went to community college. Maybe they're self-taught and certified. Maybe they switched careers and now they went through a boot camp. Or maybe they're veterans. Maybe they've been formerly incarcerated. There is a very wide, broad array of experiences that people can bring to the table that we don't see in tech right now. Next, we got demographic diversity, which is the more tried and tested gender expression, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and all of that. These models are typically trained to hire models. You're looking at folks with high potential. They have technical abilities. Maybe they're not up to where you want them to be, but the whole point is the 6 to 12 months is for you to train them up to what you need them to be, and then go on to hire them. And finally, this is an evaluative program. So this means that you're interviewing them, they're interviewing you. This is 6 to 12 months that everybody gets to know each other and make sure that this is a relationship that you want to move forward with. Apprentices are a growing trend in the industry. Like Twilio is one company that's doing it, but these are just some of the other big names that are also investing in this in their own ways. Different sizes, different priorities, but they're all working on it. Back in May at Signal, Lafon and Jeff announced Hatch on our main stage. And since then, basically, we also made a public commitment of 100 apprenticeships in 5 years. And right now, I'm executing on the first cohort, so let me tell you a little bit about what that looks like. There we go. So since I started in this role, I've been busy building up relationships with boot camps, with our internal teams, and just kind of getting the lay of the land for like what our peer companies are doing, and kind of getting my plan together for the next 6 months. This past quarter, Q2, our apprenticeship model is very unique in that the team spends the first 3 months working together. They're being trained, I'm working very closely with them, and we're executing on a project for a nonprofit through Twilio.org. So we worked with avaz.org to build a pro-democracy phone banking tool this time around, which we released into the wild for open source development just a few weeks ago, and they're pretty pleased with what we made. And then finally, the last 3 months of their apprenticeship is when they're actually with a product team and interning in a much more traditional sense. But because they've had 3 months at the company before, they know how teams work, they know how our technical processes work, and really this gives them a leg up when it comes to being productive from day one on their new teams. And finally, the goal is that early next year, we should be making go, no-go decisions, fingers crossed for actually hiring all 5 of our wonderful apprentices on board. So let's jump straight into what you folks can take from this talk, which is executive sponsorship, how to build partnerships, and what things you need to rework in your organizations. This is aimed at small to mid-sized companies, kind of like Twilio. If you're more mature, you might be able to take something away from it as well, but I'm going to try and keep it as targeted as possible. So the goal about this, of this section is how do you make sure that you make an actual case for an apprenticeship program as you're growing as a company? Because you want to make sure that it aligns with your business goals. Who's seen this graphic before? This is a graphic from the 2015 survey that McKinsey did, which covered about 366 different companies across the world, and they basically found that companies that are more ethnically or gender diverse are likely to outperform those that are less so. And really, and also I believe Credit Suisse did a survey where they said that if there's one or more women on the board, they're more likely to get higher returns on equity and all of that. So really, if money talks to your leadership, go use this stat. And let's dive into how these diverse teams actually deliver on this. You've got a team that is now representative of the customers. They bring their different experiences to the table. If you are good leadership in that team, you capitalize on those differences. You focus on the facts you need to solve the problem, and you innovate. Now, this is pretty high level, but really it depends on what your team looks like. There's another gap we need to focus on, which is that we have a big gap between computer science grads and the number of jobs we have open at this point. So really, when you look at the fact that the bootcamp market is continuing to grow, and I know this is not taking into account community college and self-taught folks, but really, this is an industry that is growing to meet this demand, and it's up to us in the tech corporations to kind of focus on education and onboarding, which is another way you can sell this program, which is you onboard fresh cohorts, you document the progress of how they get on board your company, how they bring up to speed, and you generalize these learnings to the rest of the engineering org as well, because if you don't have an engineering education department just yet, this is a great way to bootstrap that. You make sure you produce content and you keep iterating on this with future iterations of your apprenticeship as well as normal hires. Let's focus on building partnerships real quick. You need to find your champions within your company. You need management to kind of get this executive buy-in. You need engineering, which is the core mentorship. And then you've got talent, the talent teams that help actually recruit. Like, for instance, the first time we threw this open, we had over 240 applications in just 3 weeks, and this was a soft launch, so things can get pretty crazy. You've got our ERGs, which offer support for folks outside of that business unit, but maybe they have a different way of identifying with those folks, and that support is super important. And finally, if you have D&I folks like LaFawn, who was amazing, and you just got to hear her speak on stage, they offer that overall perspective of how this program should develop. You need to identify your host teams next, because not everyone's set up to do this. You want leadership that's invested. You want a team that has the capacity to mentor people. A diverse team makeup so they actually feel like they belong. And you want a friendly tech stack that makes it easy for folks to transition on. And finally, a product roadmap that's going to keep them hungry. You want to secure sources. You want to make sure that you're looking at all your different options and talking to them and finding out what works best based on your needs. Boot camps, community colleges, self-taught certified folks, hybrid programs, which are kind of coming up recently, and obviously make room for internal transfers as well. Because you want to make sure that inclusion reflects back within what you already have at your company. So you got your pre-flight checklist. You got partner teams, you got sources identified, you finalized your head count, hopefully, and you got a clear job description of what you want this apprenticeship to look like. And you have HR and talent resources on board to help you spin this up. Next thing you're going to do is you're going to rework a bunch of the different processes, or at least focus and refine them just to make sure that they're very intentional and inclusive. So start with the interview process. You want it to be collaborative. You don't want it to exclude people. You want to make sure there's room for folks to come into the room, into the physical interview room, and they feel like they belong even on day one, day zero when they're interviewing. You use that to create a technical baseline for sure. That's more of a sanity check just to make sure that they have their nuts and bolts together. But really, what you're looking for is potential and proficiency, which is when you turn the heat up, when you feed new information, when you turn it into a learning environment, how do they grow and thrive? And finally, you are looking at what they bring to your organization that you don't already have, which is super important. And finally, you do invest in their stories, because these people bring a certain self to the interview, but there is a whole story behind them that you really should try and get to know more. High-touch mentorship is super important for career growth. They need stack walkthroughs, technical resources, pair programming. You need to be a sounding board for them. They'll have lots of questions, and they'll want a lot of feedback. And you want bias-free evaluations. Basically, you want something that aligns with the full-time roles. The evaluation should align with the full-time role. You want an objective rubric so that there is no wiggle room for kind of saying, I don't really want to work with this person, even though they are fully qualified to be on my team. You need self-evaluations, which is a way for them to look against this rubric and see how they're doing. You want a regular cadence for all this performance, so there's no nasty surprise at the end of the apprenticeship, and you have hopefully a full conversion. And you want full transparency, so that nothing's going under the radar at all. And lastly, collecting feedback is super important. Qualitative interviews, surveys, you should be doing this at every single stage of the apprenticeship. You should generalize the learnings from all of this so you can apply it to the next round. Like, this is a quick summary of the comments that we've got and a bunch of the different feedback we have. Uh-oh. Let's go back to that slide real quick. And OK, hopefully it stays this time. Yep. So kind of small. I'll try to send this slide out later or tweet it out or something like that. But basically, we looked at their belonging. We looked at how they were doing in their team, in their cohort, how they felt about the nonprofit work we were doing. And basically, some of these things gave me info that I need to work on for the next iteration. Like, for instance, they didn't have a great experience working with the nonprofit, so I know what I need to work on next time. So I can apply the same survey next time to see how the next cohort's doing. So you're always moving forward. And finally, none of this would be possible without these 5 amazing folks who are watching right now, I think, from Twilio HQ. They have a viewing party or something like that. Big shout out to them, because none of this would be possible without what they brought to the table as well. I'm already a minute over time. I wanted to keep going on about this. This is me on Twitter. This is me and my duck. I'm the perfectly normal beast. If anyone has read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, you know what this is about, and this is my pick-a-bird. Tweet at me. I'll be around the conference as well with my pause for thought. But yeah, that's all I have for you right now. Thanks.